Hey, floor cleaner! Get up here and let me show you what real class looks like. An arrogant, boastful black belt instructor barked the order at the black janitor, demanding he step onto the training mat just to be mocked in front of the entire martial arts class. His voice boomed through the Iron Summit gym, tearing through the room and startling everyone. They all turned toward the man who was kneeling on the floor, quietly wiping away a streak of sweat. But moments later, the whole class fell completely silent when they witnessed the shocking truth. What happened next would leave all of them stunned. Before we begin, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And I'm genuinely curious. Where are you listening to this story from? Leave a comment about where you're watching or reading this. I love seeing how far our story travels, and whether it touches your heart. The Iron Summit gym that night was thick with the smell of sweat and the constant thud of gloves slamming into heavy bags. Fluorescent lights cast cold, blade-like streaks across the room. Inside that heavy atmosphere, a shout suddenly tore everything apart. "Hey, old man, come up here and show the kids a few moves." Logan Pierce, a black belt instructor, tall, broad-shouldered, and always wearing that "I'm better than you" expression, stood in the center of the mat like a self-appointed king. His voice rang out with arrogance, slapping the ears of everyone present, a blow as sharp as a punch to someone's pride. Mason Hale, the black man kneeling on the floor, slowly lifted his head. His eyes were swallowed by a chilling calm, the kind of stillness you see on a lake just before a storm breaks, the kind of quiet that belongs to something that has slept too long and only needs one wrong word to awaken violently. The cleaning cloth in Mason's hand froze midair. The light struck his shaved head, making the sweat on his brow gleam. No one could tell if it was from exhaustion or from an emotion being stirred awake. The entire gym fell silent. No one understood why the air suddenly felt as heavy as lead. But somehow, it was as if someone had just tugged on a forbidden wire. Logan laughed loudly, a rough, abrasive sound dripping with mockery. "What, you scared? Scared to stand on the same mat as people who actually know how to fight?" A few students forced awkward laughs, but their eyes avoided Mason, as if sensing something was wrong, as if realizing this man was not as simple as his hunched back and mop suggested. In that brief moment, none of them knew that Logan's contemptuous question had just opened the door to a past buried for 2 decades. A storm was coming, and it was coming from the person everyone thought was the most harmless man in the room. The moment Mason's eyes met Logan's, it was like two opposite currents violently colliding. One side was loud, showy arrogance. The other was a terrifying, bone-deep stillness. And in that exact second, the story drifted off the normal track of a typical martial arts class. Because Mason was not the man Logan thought he was. Mason Hale, 45 years old, had been a janitor for exactly 3 weeks. He came to Iron Summit every afternoon with a hunched figure, shoulders drawn tight, as if afraid of taking up too much space in the room. His calloused hands gripped the mop as though it was the only thing left in life he could still hold on to. To most people, Mason was nothing more than the black guy who cleans the floor, a quiet shadow drifting across the mat, someone people looked through, not at. But behind that resigned exterior were eyes that once burned like glowing embers, the eyes of a man who had once stood under blazing lights, once heard thousands of voices shouting his name, and the same eyes had witnessed his life shatter in a single night. Mason didn't want anyone asking, didn't want anyone knowing, didn't want the pity, the curiosity, or the invasion into wounds he could barely face himself. He chose silence the way some choose penance. He chose quiet days to bury a past soaked in blood and tears. But Iron Summit was not a place where one could disappear. And Logan Pierce, with a mouth sharp as a blade and an ego like an uncontrolled flame, kept poking at the scars Mason was desperate to hide. A floor scrubber only knows how to bow his head. Doesn't matter what color you are, they're all the same. A sentence tossed out like a dull knife, seemingly harmless, but cutting exactly where it hurt most. Mason stood there, his heart tightening for a beat. Logan's laughter rang out, cold and metallic, and only the perceptive ones saw it. In the depths of Mason's eyes, something was beginning to stir. Something he had locked away for 20 years. Something Logan absolutely should never have touched. After Logan's final insulting remark, the air inside Iron Summit thickened, as if someone had suddenly drained all the oxygen out of the room. Averted gazes, dry, nervous gulps, and in the middle of it all, Mason remained silent. But it was no longer the silence of resignation. It was the kind of silence that warns a storm is about to break. Mason pressed his hand against the floor and rose to his feet. A simple movement, yet something about it felt wrong. Too smooth, too controlled, too graceful. That wasn't how a janitor got up after scrubbing the floor. It was how someone who had trained thousands of hours rose after taking a knockdown. A young student inhaled sharply, a long line of goosebumps racing down his arm. Elena, the girl who always observed quietly, tilted her head. That's not right. Normal people don't stand up like that. Even the training mat seemed to vibrate lightly beneath Mason's footing, as if it recognized something familiar, as if this very place once knew who he really was. Logan didn't notice anything, or rather, he refused to notice. He burst into laughter, loud, hollow, and grating. Look at you shaking already. And here I thought you were gonna impress someone. But Mason wasn't shaking. He stood tall, shoulders opening, breath slowing into a rhythm he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. A rhythm he had sworn never to return to. His gaze swept across the gym like a cold current. Then it paused, just for a heartbeat, on Logan's legs. And in that instant, Mason saw everything. The weakness, the sloppiness, the unearned pride. The invisible scars in Mason began to throb, each pulse like someone knocking from inside his chest. Not fear, not anger, but a long-sleeping beast, opening its eyes. And only one person in the room, Elena, realized it. She swallowed. Master Logan, I think you should stop. But it was too late. Far too late to pull someone back from the edge of the cliff he himself was sprinting toward. No one knew the exact moment everything began to slip off the rails. They only remembered that after Mason stood up in that way, a way that looked nothing like a janitor, the air inside Iron Summit felt as if someone had tightened a fist around it. That silence, instead of warning, only made Logan more pleased with himself, like a man who enjoys poking at another's wounds. Logan took a step toward Mason, his eyes narrowing with disdain. Chicago's a big city, and this is the best they could hire to clean up? Looks like you crawled out of some poor little ghetto. The words hit the room like a rock thrown into a lake. Ripples spread, crashing across every face on the training mat. Elena Torres, the quiet Mexican girl, frowned gently. There are pains you don't need to own to know. Something is deeply wrong. Master Logan, please stop. Her voice was soft but firm. Logan snapped around, eyes flaring as if personally insulted. Oh, you have opinions now? You're here to learn martial arts, not lecture me. Silence devoured the room. No one dared move. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop spinning. But Mason, he heard every word. He heard them the way one hears echoes of their past. The names he wanted to forget. The judgments made on skin color instead of skill. In Logan's eyes, there wasn't just arrogance. There was a rotten sort of power. The kind built by pushing others down, just to stand taller. Elena looked between Mason and Logan, her expression torn between fear and outrage. You're disrespecting him. Her voice trembled slightly. Logan waved her off. Disrespecting? You think I owe respect to a floor cleaner? Wake up. And that was the moment something inside Mason cracked. A tiny fracture in his pride, and in the vow he had buried for 20 years. The entire gym now stood on a razor-thin edge. Either this was just going to be a terrible evening, Or it was the beginning of a storm. Logan had no idea he had just invited upon himself. The moment Logan scoffed, "Respect a floor cleaner?" Mason's lips twitched, just slightly, but enough for Elena to notice. An old wound had just been pressed. No, not pressed by accident, but deliberately. And the thing Mason had feared for years finally rose from the dark. Mason's eyes drifted shut. The noise of the gym faded. Footsteps, heavy breaths, the thud of punching bags, all dissolved into a deep, echoing void. Then the past crashed into him, violent, like a kick straight to the chest. 20 years ago, Mason Hale was not the janitor. He was Iron Phantom Hale, the undefeated steel ghost, 37 wins, the man who made stadiums scream themselves hoarse. He used to step into the ring with blazing spotlights hitting his skin and cheers, roaring loud enough to shake ceilings. And beside him, always, was one person, Luther King, his brother, in all but blood. The man who called Mason family. The only one who knew Mason didn't fight just to win, but to prove that black fighters deserved to stand on the highest stage. Until the sparring session that changed everything. A left roundhouse kick, a heavy thud, a stretch of silence that felt endless. Luther lay there, eyes closed, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. Warmth left his body faster than any winter Mason had ever lived through. Then came the media storm. Black fighter too violent. Kills his friend because of aggressive instincts. This is why they cannot control themselves. No one cared it was an accident. No one mentioned the brotherhood between them. Only prejudice, inflated into a sentence. The community turned its back. The fans turned their backs. Friends turned their backs. And Mason turned his back on himself. He vanished. Vanished from the lights, from the noise, from the name Iron Phantom. All that remained was Mason Hale, the man who wanted to live quietly as a breath. But today, inside Iron Summit, that past had cracked open the door Mason had kept locked for 20 years. And once a memory awakens, it does not return to sleep easily. The memory of Luther faded like a film abruptly cut, and Mason opened his eyes. Back in the present, all he saw was Logan standing in front of him, hands on his hips, wearing the arrogant expression of a man who had no idea what kind of pain he had just touched. A pain that seemed fossilized, but was really only sleeping beneath the ashes. And Logan, with all his swagger, had unknowingly blown a gust of wind onto those ashes. "Stand up properly, will you?" Logan barked, then shoved Mason's shoulder. It wasn't a strong shove, but it was full of contempt. The kind of push that made everyone around clench their fists. Because they knew this wasn't a sportsman's tap. It was a declaration of dominance. But Mason didn't move, didn't stumble, didn't show a single expression. He stood there, unmoving, like a stone statue in the middle of a storm. Except a statue is cold, and Mason was warming up. Warming in the most dangerous way. The warmth of a warrior's instinct being awakened. Elena stepped back half a pace. She didn't know what she was afraid of. Logan or Mason. But her body reacted before her mind could catch up. The air in the gym changed. The smell of sweat turned sharper. Sounds seemed to slow. Every breath echoed like a drum striking beneath the floor. Logan snorted. "What? Why are you just standing there like that? Scared I touched you?" He didn't notice that. No one else laughed. Because everyone felt what Logan couldn't. Mason's silence wasn't fear. It was the silence of a creature that had slept too long, stretching awake. The silence of someone who had once held victories that made entire arenas hold their breath. A student whispered, "Master Logan, I think this is bad." But Logan waved him off, not even listening. He didn't realize. The moment he shoved Mason, he shoved open the final door holding Mason back from who he once was. And once instinct wakes, it demands to be answered. No one knew why a single shove from Logan could make the entire room change color like that. But after that moment when Mason stood still, so still you could hear a pin drop, The silence spread and spread, like a rising wave about to swallow the shore. And then Mason took one tiny step forward, a step so small it should have meant nothing. But in that exact moment, Logan, the man who always wrapped himself in authority, instinctively took a big step back, his shoes scraping across the cold floor. Everyone in the training room saw it. They saw who was truly confident and who had only ever hidden behind the sound of his own shouting. The air shifted. Power changed hands. In a single breath, Mason looked up, his eyes deep and calm like a midnight lake. No anger, no aggression, just a stillness so quiet it was terrifying. He spoke, his voice as soft as the wind brushing past an open window. When this is over, you'll apologize to them for turning this place into a school that teaches from the heart. No one could breathe. The words weren't loud, but they hit the floor like iron weights, heavy enough to make Logan choke for half a second before he forced out a crooked smile. Logan sneered. "Oh? You trying to reshape my dojo now? Who do you think you are, huh? A gatekeeper?" But no one laughed. No one stood with Logan. Elena murmured, her eyes locked on Mason. "I think this is going too far." Another student clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. "That's not the voice of an ordinary man. That's the voice someone uses right before a storm explodes." Mason remained there, spine straight, gaze steady. But something strange radiated from him, a force both cold and burning, like the moment a frozen lake begins to crack under the first touch of sunrise. Logan swallowed hard, a lifetime teaching martial arts. And this was the first time he felt that he had challenged the wrong man, a man who had been silent for 20 years. And when the quiet man finally speaks, it is never a joke. His words rose like a wave about to break. The moment Mason said, "You will apologize to them," the air in the training room felt as if someone had gently squeezed it. Not an explosion, but a tension so sharp that a single touch could shatter it. Logan didn't notice the shift, but Elena did. She felt something was wrong. A regular janitor couldn't make an entire room step back without raising his voice. And that feeling, that instinct, pushed Elena into action. She bent slightly, quietly slipping her phone from her gym bag. Her fingers trembled so much, the screen rejected her fingerprint 3 times. Then she typed, "Iron Phantom Hail, Accident Fighter." 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Results appeared. Photos, videos, old articles. And right on the first line, the name resurfaced, pulled back into the light as if by fate. Mason Iron Phantom Hail, 37-0, undefeated fighter. Elena's eyes widened. She tapped the first video, the legendary knockout. The glowing screen cast its light across Mason's face. The face in the video was identical to the man standing just a few steps away. Elena's legs weakened. Her phone almost slipped from her hand. She turned toward the group of students and whispered, as if revealing a national secret. It's him. Oh my God. It's really him." Someone else grabbed the phone. His eyes went wide. His face went pale. Then he shouted, "No way. Coach Logan just insulted an undefeated fighter?" The news spread faster than breath. Every gaze shifted, from confusion to fear, and finally, awe. They understood a chilling truth. Logan hadn't just disrespected a janitor. He had just challenged one of the most dangerous MMA fighters in history, and he did it in front of the entire class. Across the room, Logan was still laughing loudly, still wearing that arrogant grin, still convinced he could never lose to a man who cleaned floors, completely unaware of the wave curling up behind him. Meanwhile, Mason's eyes stayed steady, unwavering. He looked down at his hands, the hands that once moved like lightning, delivering strikes that silenced entire arenas. He understood one thing clearly. Once the truth was out, there was no going back. When the phone in Elena's hand buzzed under the weight of all those eyes staring at it, something strange happened. The entire dojo fell completely silent. Mason said nothing. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He just stood there, back straight, shoulders calm, as if he'd grown used to the truth about him, always arriving at the wrong moment. And Logan? He looked around, saw his students whispering, saw a few of them looking at Mason with something close to fear. And instead of stopping, he did the stupidest thing possible. He tried to reclaim his authority. Want to know where the circus is? He inhaled sharply, smirking. Right here. Get on the mat, floor cleaner. That was the moment everyone saw it clearly. Logan wasn't challenging Mason. He was challenging his own fear. The two men stepped into the sparring area. No drums, no audience, just 20 wide-open eyes and heartbeats flapping like caged birds inside chests. The fight began. Logan charged first. He unleashed a textbook combo. Jab, cross, hook, low kick. His breath came hard, his shoes scraping across the mat with sharp dragging sounds. Mason didn't strike back. He didn't dodge fast. He didn't act like an MMA legend. He simply slipped each attack with movements soft as water. A tilt of the head, a light rotation of the shoulder, a short step back like a quiet breath. The more Logan attacked, the more terrified he became. Sweat streamed down his face, yet he couldn't touch Mason, not even once. And then the defining moment arrived. Mason stepped forward, just one step. He raised his palm, no fist, no wind-up, and touched the center of Logan's chest. A touch, not a push. But Logan flew backward nearly 6 feet, hitting the floor like a sandbag knocked off its stand. The whole room shot to its feet. No screams, no applause, only a stunned silence, trembling like a lake struck by lightning. No blood, no brutality, not a single wasted strike, just the truth laid bare. They belonged to two different worlds, earth and sky, fire and water. Mason hadn't used much force, but Logan lost all the arrogance he'd carried for years. The arrogance that made him believe he was an unbreakable wall no one could ever touch. Logan lay motionless on the floor for a few seconds, like a shattered statue that had no idea how it ended up on the ground. His heavy breathing echoed through the room, a room that had already fallen dead silent, loud enough for everyone to see the fear clinging to his chest. The arrogance on his face was gone, wiped clean. He tried to push himself up, but it took him until the second attempt to stand, after that stunning blow that had landed straight on the heart of his pride. What little arrogance he had left clung to him like a thin layer of dust, the kind that could be swept away by the slightest breeze. And Mason, after that gentle touch packed with experience and the weight of a heart forged in loyalty and iron, merely stepped back half a step. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He didn't savor victory, because to Mason this fight had no winner, and it wasn't even worthy of being called a fight. When Logan finally stood upright, Mason lifted his gaze, eyes soft, yet heavy like an unseen finishing blow. If I weren't the Iron Phantom, his voice was low, slow, slicing through the air like a thin blade. Would you have treated me any differently? Logan froze. The entire room shuddered. Mason took another half step forward, just close enough for Logan to hear every word. Or would you still look down on another janitor, just because they're poor, or because of the color of their skin? No more heavy breathing, no more ceiling fan, no more shifting feet, only the question hanging there, so heavy it felt like the entire room tilted to one side. And in that moment, everyone witnessed something they never imagined. Logan bowed his head, not because he lost, but because for the first time in his life, someone forced him to look straight at his own reflection, not in a mirror, but in the victim of his own behavior. A trainee whispered, so softly it was almost a breath. Coach Logan was never the strongest person in this room, and maybe he was never a good one. No one disagreed. No one called him coach anymore. Mason's question, light as a breath, yet strong enough to shatter the toxic power Logan had built over the years, That was the real strike Mason delivered today. After Mason's question, the room didn't just fall silent. It solidified. Even the ceiling lights seemed to dim, as if forcing everyone to focus on one single thing. The moment Logan had to face who he truly was. For a few seconds that stretched like an entire year, Logan stood there, eyes trembling, lips shaking, hands clasped together, as if he were trying to hide the chaos rising inside him. Mason's question wasn't loud, but it was strong enough to unlock doors Logan had spent years trying to seal shut. Then, Logan broke down. Not the loud sobs of a weak man, but a strangled, guttural cry. The kind that sounds like guilt carving its blade straight into someone's chest. Tears fell onto the padded floor. Soft sounds, but so clear the whole room instinctively bowed their heads. You're right. Logan's voice cracked with every breath. It wasn't because you're the Iron Phantom that I was wrong. All this time, I've wronged everyone who wasn't like me. He turned to the students. Each bow of his head dipped lower than the last, as if peeling off layer after layer of arrogance he had wrapped around himself to hide his fear of inadequacy. I'm sorry, all of you. His voice trembled like a string stretched too tight. I'm sorry for becoming a person even I don't recognize anymore. Finally, he looked at Mason. No more bitterness, no more authority. Only a man staring into the darkness he had created for himself. Mason, I'm sorry. Mason stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Logan's shoulder. Not immediate forgiveness, but acknowledgement of his first honest effort. Sorry is only the first step. Mason's voice was low, warm yet firm like old hardwood. Your actions will prove whether you've truly changed. The entire gym held its breath. This wasn't a fight about strength anymore. It was a fight about humanity. And for the first time, Logan genuinely wanted to win that fight. The moment Logan bowed his head to apologize, the Iron Summit training room felt as if it had just survived a massive storm. But the real storm was only beginning. Because right after Logan's choked voice faded, one student quietly lifted their phone, not to chase views, but to preserve the moment a man learned to start over. But the internet doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about the truth laid bare. And so, just one night after that apology, Logan's entire life swerved in a direction he never imagined. The video of Logan being lightly tapped by Mason and flying 1.8 meters spread across the internet like a spark tossed into a pile of dry straw. Hundreds of comments. Black belt mocking a janitor? You reap what you sow. Respect the janitor, coach. Within 72 hours, Logan lost more than half of his students. Parents pulled their kids out. People who once respected him turned their backs. The media called it the moral fall of Coach Logan Pierce. A career that once burned bright was now nothing but ashes. Meanwhile, Mason, the man who never sought fame, was invited back to the gym. Not to fight, not to prove anything, but to bring value from the core of his own heart, to stand up once more and help Logan awaken. From that moment, the moment he almost became a laughingstock, Mason's life shifted too, so he could teach the people training in martial arts. Starting from morality. On the first day of teaching, Mason stood on the mat, looking at the young faces watching him. He spoke slowly, softly, yet each word fell like a hammer forging a soul. True strength doesn't lie in a punch. Strength is in how you treat someone weaker than you. The entire room went silent. No gloves pounding, no shouts of technique. Just one lesson, heavier than any knockout blow. In a corner of the room, Logan stood still, listening. No longer the posture of a coach, no longer the arrogant smile. Only a man. Learning again from the beginning, like a true martial arts student. 3 months had passed since that fateful night, and Iron Summit had almost become a different gym entirely. No more power-soaked shouting, no more sneers about skin color, jobs, or backgrounds. No more Logan Pierce, standing in the center with his old arrogance. Only slow, steady breaths, punches landing like calm heartbeats, children bowing to each other with bright eyes instead of fearful ones. Mason had transformed what once felt suffocating into a space of healing, as if he were replanting a field that had been brutally plowed for years. And the miracle was, tiny sprouts of respect were beginning to grow right where contempt once bloomed. Logan still came to train every day, quieter, humbler. He mopped the floors with Mason, voluntarily, without anyone asking. A former instructor, now learning how to be a true student. That simple truth made Mason remember the question he once threw at Logan that day. If I weren't the Iron Phantom, would you have treated me differently? Now, watching Logan bow his head as he carefully placed each mat in its position, Mason knew. Some falls hit hard enough to shatter years of ego. Some storms are big enough to sweep away the dust of arrogance clinging to a person's heart. And then, during a weekend class, a small kid asked Mason, "Teacher, can just one fall really make someone change?" Mason paused, looking at the young faces waiting for his answer. He smiled, a smile as gentle as early summer wind. A fall only opens the door. Whether you walk through it is a choice each person makes. But respect, when strong enough, can wake anyone up. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Then applause filled the air, warm and sincere. Not applause for skill, but applause for a lesson in humanity. And that was the most beautiful knockout Mason had ever delivered in his life. In life, never underestimate the strength of someone less fortunate than you, just because of their status, their position, or the color of their skin. As the story above shows us, real strength can come from anyone in this world. Strength can rise from a person who seems invisible, hidden beneath society's prejudice about titles and skin color. Let your heart lead with respect and kindness, because that is the strongest bond we can ever build with one another. If you've listened to the whole story, please follow and leave a comment, sharing how it made you feel. See you in the next story.